This whole Florida condo situation, I gotta say, every time I think we've gotten a handle on it.
It's like a whole other layer gets peeled back, right?
Exactly. It's wild. We knew it was going to be complicated, but this is something else.
It's got everything, tragedy, politics, and people just trying to keep a roof over their heads.
And not losing their shirts while they're at it.
It's a lot.
I think to really get into it, though, we got to rewind a bit. Back to 2021, Surfside. That was a wake-up call for a lot of folks.
Absolutely. And what most people don't realize is that before Surfside, Florida law didn't actually make condo associations put aside enough money for the really big repairs.
So, like, if your building needed major foundation work, they might not even have the funds.
Exactly, which is a big reason this has all become such a mess.
Yeah, I bet. So then Surfside happens.
And suddenly everyone's scrambling, right? Mandatory safety inspections come in, which, don't get me wrong, is a good thing. We want safe buildings.
Of course, yeah.
But now imagine you're a condo owner just minding your business and boom, you get hit with this huge bill for your share of the repairs. An assessment, they call it.
So it's like you want to make your building safe, but it comes with this huge price tag. Talk about a rock and a hard place.
And for a lot of people, this isn't just an inconvenience, it's their life savings we're talking about.
It's got to be so stressful. So how does DeSantis, Florida's governor, fit into this whole picture? He's been pretty vocal about wanting to fix things.
Yeah, he's been talking about reforms and relief, but it's still kind of fuzzy what that actually means,
Right. What are those reforms going to look like in practice? What's he actually proposing? So when he says reforms, is he talking about, like, changing the laws around how condo associations handle their money?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. He wants to make sure they're actually putting enough aside for these major repairs, not just, hoping for the best.
So stricter rules about saving, maybe.
Exactly. Maybe even some incentives to help them actually build those reserve funds.
Okay, that makes sense. And on the relief side of things, what's he proposing to help people who are already stuck with these massive bills?
Well, one idea that's been tossed around is low-interest loans. Give people a way to pay for these repairs over time instead of all at once,
Right. Kind of takes the edge off a little.
Yeah.
But who would actually get those loans? The condo associations themselves? Or, like, individual owners?
That's a really good question. There's definitely some debate about that. You've got people like Kevin Cortina. He's a condo association president, actually, from Hialeah, I think. And he's all for giving loans directly to owners.
What's his thinking there?
I think he's concerned about a couple of things. One is just the bureaucracy of it all. Going through the association adds a whole other layer of paperwork and hassle.
Yeah, I could see that.
And then there's also, I think, a concern about whether the money would actually get used the right way. He's seen firsthand how much stress this whole thing is putting on people. He even said it comes up at his church. Can you imagine?
Wow. It really puts things in perspective, huh?
Totally. But then you've got people like, I think there was a real estate agent named Carcasses quoted in the article, and they're saying it would be way more efficient to just give the loans to the associations directly.
So they can get started on the repairs quicker.
Exactly. And, from a safety standpoint, that makes a lot of sense.
So it's like individual needs versus the greater good, right?
Yeah.
How do you balance those two things?
It's a tough one, that's for sure. And it gets even more complicated when you factor in DeSantis also suggesting he might push back that January 1st deadline. For inspections and repairs, I mean.
I mean, I guess that buys everyone some time, but does it really solve anything?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, it's one thing to delay the deadline, but what happens after that? The problem doesn't just disappear, right?
Exactly. And I got to imagine this is a tough one for DeSantis politically, too. Especially with, everything else going on.
Oh, absolutely. This has political football written all over it. But at the end of the day, this is about real people's lives,
Absolutely. I mean, it's awful to think about, people losing their homes, especially folks who've been there for years and years, their whole life in these places, and now.
And it's not just individual owners either, right? This could snowball into a huge problem for the whole Florida real estate market.
Oh, really? How so?
Think about it. People can't afford these repairs, but they also can't sell because who's going to buy a condo with all this uncertainty hanging over it, right?
Yikes. So then what? Nobody wants to touch a Florida condo.
That's the worry. Sales could plummet, property values tank. It could impact the entire economy down there.
Wow. Okay, so we've got safety concerns, we've got people drowning in debt, and now the whole housing market might be headed for a nosedive. Is there any good news here?
Well, the interesting thing, if you can call it that, is what this all says about, us as a society, I mean.
I mean,
It's like, where's the line between what we owe to each other and what we're responsible for on our own? It's easy to say safe housing for everyone, but how do you actually make that happen, Especially when it costs a fortune.
yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't
And
it?
there's no easy answers, that's for sure. Every solution is going to have its downsides. It's going to create winners and losers. That's kind of the mess we're in, isn't it?
It really is. Well, I guess that about wraps it up for this deep dive. Big thanks to our listener for bringing this whole thing to our attention. Definitely gives us all something to think about.
For sure. And hey, maybe that's the takeaway here. It's not just about Florida, right? This whole condo situation, it's like a warning sign. It's forcing us to confront some really tough questions about housing, about affordability, about safety. These aren't just Florida problems, they're everywhere.
Absolutely. So if this has gotten you thinking, listeners, and we're betting it has, keep those questions in mind.
Hey.
Do some digging. See how these issues are playing out in your community, because the answers we find, they matter for all of us.